Welcome to From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Here you'll go from making ends meet behind a keyboard to living in true freedom by using real estate well, never having to work a full-time job, report to a manager, or give your adult life to a corporation that probably doesn't care about you. We will give you everything you need for your journey: techniques, principles, real-world experience, and application, filtered through 5 key power principles from my book, People Power, Other People's Money, How to Win, Enjoy, and Reserve. Get ready to take notes. Let's jump into From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Welcome to From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. I'm Ivan, and I have a great guest here today, Alex Pardo. He has done over 700 transactions, owned a wholesale company, single family fix and flip. He's owned 3 storage facilities totaling 104,000 square feet. He runs a mastermind called Ascend, hosts a Flip Empire show, and he has also visited 23 countries and 51 cities. This is just the surface level, of course, of everything he's done, but we're going to go deeper, as deep as we can in this meeting. So welcome to the show, Alex.
Ivan, thank you so much, brother, for having me, man. I'm excited to be here and kind of pour into your audience and just serve and impact however I can, man. So I appreciate the opportunity and the invite.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for making it happen, making time for us here today. So the 5 key power principles is usually the flow of the meeting. So people power, other people's money, winning, enjoying, and reserve. So people power. Tell us about the people in your life that have facilitated this great person that is Alex Pardo.
Oh man, I gotta start with my parents and my family. I was raised in a middle class environment. I certainly didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth, Ivan. But I also don't have like your rags to riches story. Like I have nothing to complain about. I was the first and only entrepreneur really in my family to this day. So I was raised like many middle class kids in America of go out and get a good job and provide for your family and go to school and that type of messaging. But I was super fortunate that my parents were always trying to lift me up in the direction of my dreams and goals. I remember when I got a job with General Electric in their financial management program, I was making $50,000 a year right out of college. This was back in 2003, so not a terrible salary by any means coming out of college. And my parents thought I had made it. And I remember 3 months into that job, just working 60, 70, 75 hours a week, looking at Excel and PowerPoint every single day. I remember I'm not good at very many things, but I'm pretty good at some. And one of those is kind of figuring out, getting clarity about what I want, and then reverse engineering the process of how to get there. And I remember looking at my boss and her boss all the way up to like the CFO of the business. And I thought to myself, that's not the kind of life and the lifestyle that I want. I want to serve people. I want to impact. I want to start a business. So when I told my parents that, hey, I'm gonna leave this corporate job in 2 years to go start my business, they thought I was making a mistake, but they also encouraged and supported me. They said, nice. It's your life. So I'm very fortunate that I hear a lot of stories of parents and family members that try to bring you down because they want to protect you, right? They're coming at it from their paradigm, from their perspective. And I was fortunate that I had parents that really supported me. And then as I got into the business, at once I looked at coaching and mentoring as expenses. I would look at the price tag and not look at the value. And I remember I made a really, really expensive mistake in 2007, right before the market really shifted. And it was the best deal I've ever done, losing $50,000 on a luxury fix and flip. I say it's the best deal because that's what prompted me to go search for coaching and mentoring. And from 2008 to today, I have several coaches that pour into me. And so I have a lot of people that are responsible for where I'm at. First and foremost, my faith, right? God, I give him all the glory. He's most responsible for the position I'm in today, but also the people that he's put in my life, coaches, mentors, being a part of mastermind communities of other like-minded, successful entrepreneurs, associating with other content creators like yourself, podcast host. So there's a lot of people that have poured into me throughout the years.
Gotcha. So, wow. Not a lot of people say that. So that was a very provocative statement that was your best lesson learned.
Yeah, early on in my career. So I got started in real estate. So long story short, I left my corporate job January 2005. I was kind of in a transition period and I decided to go backpacking around Europe. You referenced that I visited 23 countries and 51 cities. That was in a 3.5 month period. when I went backpacking around Europe with a couple buddies. And while I was on the train is when I started consuming, like, I remember reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich,
Hmm.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Like, I started immersing myself in this world of personal development. And I was in an internet cafe in Ibiza. And I'll never forget it. I was paying like by the minute. And mind you, this was towards the tail end of that trip. And I had financed and funded that entire trip on my credit card. Like, I was going back to live with my parents after this trip, and I didn't have any savings. I didn't have any money. I was 25 years old. Not a good look, right? Like, that's not exactly how I drew it up. And a buddy of mine invited me to a marketing for deals boot camp that was happening in Atlanta, October 2005. And it was $997. That may have cost 10 grand, 100 grand at the time because I didn't have it. But I knew that I wanted to get into real estate. I knew I wanted to start a business. And so I took the plunge. I paid the $1,000. I went to this event. And you know how, like, in these events, sometimes, at least back in the day, they used to give you these 3-ring binders. When I got home, I plucked out a pre-foreclosure letter that came in the binder. I went to Kinko's at the time and I made a bunch of copies. And it was so ghetto because I sent out pre-foreclosure letters, and my first mailing campaign still had like the black 3 holes from the photocopy. I'm not kidding you. And I sent out, I don't know, 300, 400 pre-foreclosure letters. Didn't know what I was doing, kind of like fumbled my way forward. And about 2 to 2.5 months later, I ended up closing my first deal, which was 44 grand. And I ended up splitting that deal with my buddy who brought me, who's the one who invited me to the boot camp. So, uh,
Oh,
yeah, man, that was my first deal. I think it was January 2006. And I'll kind of pause there. But yeah, that's how I transitioned from my corporate job to backpacking around Europe to into real estate.
that's awesome, man. You touched on a major key that a lot of people miss out on is massive action.
Yeah.
Even if it's not like picture perfect, the details aren't right, just massive action. And a key example that we could all see day to day is Elon Musk, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw the Cybertruck presentation, but it didn't look like he prepared anything. Like he was mumbling.
That doesn't, I didn't watch it, but that doesn't surprise me at all from
Yeah,
some of the interviews I've seen of Elon.
there was like 15-second gaps in between his talking points. I was like, did this did this guy just get up and walk on the stage?
Probably. But that guy's brilliant. I mean, he's a genius, obviously. He's brilliant. But yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but that sounds like it's on brand for Elon.
Yeah, and it's massive action, right? Like he's
That's
just
right.
keep on pushing forward, even if there is a 3-hole punch in your marketing material.
Yeah, man.
You're just making it happen.
Ivan, I've always, one of the things I learned from one of those coaches years ago was I think something that distinguishes people that struggle in life and in business from those that succeed. There's a lot of variables, but one of them I think is speed of implementation, right?
Mm.
So take this podcast as an example. People are going to listen to us now in the future. They're going to watch this video. How quickly can you take something that resonates with you and then apply it to your life or business? Like, I'm talking like as fast action as possible, even if it's just the first step, because I think that first step creates momentum. One of the things I always share with people I coach is micro actions lead to macro results. So gaining clarity about what you want, why you want it, and then figuring out what are the first 3, 4, 5 steps. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by having to accomplish this big goal or this big task, when really all they need to focus on, like, what are the micro actions? Because if you do enough of those micro actions and you stack them up, they're going to lead to the macro result. And then the other thing is that people are just impatient. I think we live in a microwave society, brother, that people want success now, but yet their words and actions are not aligned. In other words, they're not willing to put the daily effort and output required to achieve what they say they want. So those are just a few things that I want to just right off the bat share with people that I think if they just focused on, like, you can't control very many things, but you can control your mindset, your thoughts, your actions, how you respond, right? How you communicate. Those are, focus on the controllables, and then get clear on what you want and come up with a game plan, and then just execute daily and just stay consistent with it.
Yeah. And we're in a day and age where the action even could be delegated very easily. Like I was
100%.
looking into doing Facebook ads here in the near future and looked on Fiverr.com. So Fiverr. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the top guy was only charging 190 to set up the initial campaign. 190. Something that would have cost probably $20,000 like 10 years ago for an
Yep.
ad agency to run it A to Z
That's
is
right.
being set up for a fraction.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book I want to kind of jump in here because you know, I think the first pillar you talked about was people, right? And so or the first principle. There's a book that really impacted me that I read probably a couple years ago, and the book is by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, I believe. Who, not how. So most things in life and business boil down to a who, not necessarily a how. And I find that when I talk to people, they're trying to figure out the how. They're trying to figure out the process, the steps that they need to take. And I think if you were to switch your mentality and your mindset, and instead of approaching a particular problem, a task, a project, a goal, a business, weight loss, fitness, whatever it is, if you just approach it, instead of asking how, you ask, okay, who can help me with this? Or who can I hire? Or who can you know what I mean? So ask who, start there, and then the how will uncover itself.
Indeed. And it's a constant process of what you want to do too, right? Like what brings you joy versus let me get rid of this as fast as possible.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I was going to buy a trailer a few months ago to haul appliances to my properties. And I was like, this is too in the weeds, man. Leave this to other people. Just pay the
Yeah.
extra delivery fee.
Yeah. And to your point, Ivan, I think if people, and I'm sure your audience and people listening to this have heard this, but how many people are applying it, right? But like get crystal clear on like what's your time worth. And don't just like come up with like a big number that is not justifiable at the stage or season that you're currently in, but like legitimately speaking, like what is your time worth? And then anything less than that, to your point, delegate or outsource it. One of the things I've talked about on my podcast, the Flip Empire Show, is like I, oftentimes I ask myself four questions. Can I automate this? Can I outsource it? Can I delegate it? Or can I just delete it? Right? Because how many times do we find ourselves doing things that we're so accustomed or used to doing? But like, what's the end result or what's the purpose of it? And sometimes we can just delete 10, 20, 30% right off the top that we just don't need to do because it doesn't serve us anymore. And then the other times ask, can it be automated, outsourced, or delegated? If it can't, and it fits into your wheelhouse, your unique abilities, your genius zone that Dan Sullivan talks about, then those are the revenue generating activities or the things that fill you up that you should be focused on. Everything else should belong to somebody else.
For sure. And I could add to that too. Another way to think about it would be, does it create more liability?
Yeah.
Like in the case of the trailer, if a fridge falls off and hits the car behind me,
It's
they're
true,
coming
man.
after my assets as fast as possible.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah. No, that's a. I'm glad you said that because you know sometimes we don't think 2, 3 layers deep when we make a decision, right? And there's collateral damage that can come with making a small decision, like, oh, let me just go get a trailer, instead of what you should have been asking. What you did is like, okay, who can help with this, right? So that I can focus on what I'm good at and what I enjoy.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a good people power section. Let's move on to other people's money or resources.
Yeah.
When it comes to capital or resources, contractors, attorneys, etc. I guess what's your first way of attaining these sorts of contacts and resources into your
Yeah.
network?
Yeah, great question because I always value people over profits, and I think that's a great way to kind of bridge what you know your 5 step process, your framework, your principles. I think if people focus on building quality, meaningful relationships with others, with the right people, and they worry less about what they're going to get in return of the relationship, I think not only is life more joyful and fulfilling, but I think everything, I think it's the Zig Ziglar quote, right? Like help enough people get what they want and you'll obtain and receive everything you want. And too many people are transactionally focused, right? It's what can I get from you? Or, you know, sometimes I kind of chuckle and laugh because I'll get emails or messages on Facebook, and I don't know the person, but they're asking for something. And I understand it, and there's some empathy there, but it's like that's the worst way to approach a relationship. Instead of like, how can I contribute? How can I give? How can I add value to you, Ivan? How can I add value to the audience? If I came on here and I was just trying to like pitch and promote without really genuinely wanting to help and contribute, it's going to fall flat, right? And nobody really appreciates that. So
Yeah.
like, how can you have that service mentality? It's kind of like a buddy of mine years ago said, how do you heart close someone, not hard close them, right? Like, how do you lead with your heart, with service? And so every interaction that I go into, I always figure out like when we first got on this thing, I'm like, I wanted to know more about your audience. Like, how can I help and contribute? I'm genuinely coming at this interview and this podcast from that mindset and from that perspective. How can I just pour into people listening? Because I know that if I do that enough, like whatever it is I'm after is going to take care of itself. I'm not, now granted, I got to do the work, I got to take the action like we talked about earlier. But I think if I genuinely feel if people focused on others and serving other people, then what you want is going to just laws of reciprocation. It's going to happen if you're taking the right types of actions. So yeah, man, I think to answer your question more specifically, I think we need to be very thoughtful and intentional about the rooms that we put ourselves in, the environments that we put ourselves in. That's why I'm such a big advocate of masterminds, why I started a mastermind Ascend 4 years ago, because I've grown so much from being in the right environments. And oftentimes it just takes one relationship, one conversation, one idea, one thought that you hear that sparks inspiration. Like it just takes one thing to completely change your life and business if you really think about it. I recently hired a coach and made a pretty significant investment, and he has challenged me in ways that I haven't been challenged in a while. And as a result, I'm taking certain actions that I wasn't taking in the past. It's not that he's taught me anything new per se, but my actions and my daily commitments have changed as a result of like making a significant investment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There was a thing my pastor showed on a screen slide a few months ago. It was basically how if you try to work out yourself, it's something like 10 to 30% success rate. But if you hire a coach, your success rate for working out and keeping consistent is 80 to 400%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is definitely a major shift to have somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Now, I think the caveat or the one thing I'll piggyback to what you're saying is that sometimes I've seen that pendulum swing the other way where people hire a coach thinking that's the magic bullet, thinking that's the like the press red easy button that you see at Walmart. A coach is not responsible for your success. A coach is there to guide you, hold you accountable, give you instruction, put the mirror back around you, tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. But when people take responsibility and accountability for their results, that's when things change, right? Like you can hire Ivan or you can hire Tony Robbins. They're not responsible for your success. You're responsible for your success.
Yeah. There's only so much butt kicking me or Tony could do. Like you have to do the action, do the work at the
That's
end of the
right.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, back to the trainer analogy, right? Like if you and I hire a trainer and we get in the gym, like they can't eat the food for us, they can't lift the weights for us. We got to do that. They're there to guide you and instruct you and hold you accountable and lead you, but you got to do the work.
I've been hiring other people to eat my food. I've been doing it wrong this entire time.
Yeah, man. Could you imagine if we can get a six pack by having other people eat our food?
Yeah.
Here, you eat the broccoli and carrots and the asparagus and all that good stuff.
So you mentioned an interesting point too around the rooms, being careful of the rooms you're in.
Yeah.
Do you still attend free networking meetings or almost explicitly now paid?
And that's a really good question. I'm trying to, I don't want to lie, obviously. So I'm trying to think of the last free networking. To answer your question while I'm kind of like thought jogging here, the bulk of the meetings and events I go to are paid. The bulk of them. I'm not saying I haven't been to any free ones in the last couple of years, but it's certainly not the majority. The majority of the rooms I intentionally put myself in are paid events, and I think that's with reason, because when you immerse yourself in that type of environment, Ivan, you're also being surrounded by people who have made a similar investment. Those are the people I want to be around, right? Because we've all experienced like getting something for free and just not quite valuing it as much
Yeah.
because it's free. Like there's no skin. You didn't have to like contribute. But back to my example of hiring a coach, when you make a significant investment or when you pay to attend an event, right? Like I believe that when people pay, they pay attention. and you just show up as a better version of yourself when you're fully invested into something versus like it just being free. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. Like, I'm not saying there's no value in going to free networking events or RIA meetings, or because there is value. And when I got started, like that's all I did was attend the RIA twice a month. And I would go to the different ones in the different counties, and I would network and go to as many free events as possible because I wanted to build the relationships. I wanted to like press palms and contribute and learn and grow. And so that's fantastic. But I think when you're able to put yourself in a place where others are making significant investments, you tend to just level up.
That's true, man. The closest thing I could think of to that equation is I purchased this amazing program for $1 a few years ago. Had a lot of things that I could use in my business, but now looking back at it, I didn't even log in. Like, even though I
Yeah,
had 200 things, like there was just no urgency because I
that's right.
just paid $1. I forgot about what it was already, even though
That's
I'm
right.
sure it was
That's
really
right.
valuable.
And it doesn't, exactly your point. Like I was just gonna say, it doesn't mean that what you paid $1 for isn't valuable. It just means that you didn't have to part with hard-earned dollars to obtain it. But I bet you if you would have paid $1,000 for it, you probably would have carved out some time to go through it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is, one of the things I realize I think businesses in general, I heard this somewhere on YouTube, and I think I believe it to be true. I think most businesses don't charge enough for their products and services. And I think in the business we're in, the more you charge, the better position you're putting your clients to succeed because they're fully invested versus if like you just charge a couple bucks, very few might go through the content and take action, but most won't, right?
Yeah.
Versus the people that actually make a significant investment.
That's true, man. We're hitting some gold here. So I want to touch back to what you mentioned around starting with giving.
Mhm.
So especially for somebody really new to sales and new to business, what's a practical example of starting a conversation with giving, but then when do you know when is the right time to do the ask?
Mm, such a good question, man. Gary Vaynerchuk, uh, authored a book. I think it's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. This was probably like a decade ago, and it's been a minute since I read it. But the point of the book is give, 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 then ask. So I don't know that I have a formula per se, right? Like I'm not methodical about like, hey Ivan, you and I are now starting to build a relationship. Let me give to Ivan, let me give to Ivan, let me give to Ivan. And then on week 4, I'm gonna ask Ivan for something. So I don't approach it that way. I just, man, I don't know if my answer is gonna help people because I think the way I do it is just natural and organic. I just genuinely want to help people. And I'm gonna be there for them and I'm gonna show up. And at some point in the future, I may or may not ask for something, right? Like, but I'm not giving with the intention of getting something from you in return. If I never get one thing from you, Ivan, in the future, I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I'm perfectly fine just contributing to the relationship and giving. Now, granted, you ideally the other person has the same mindset. Like nobody wants to be around somebody who's just a leech and a taker. And I've been around people that I can sense they're just here to receive. They're just here to take. They're not here to add value. And those people don't last too long in my world, right? But I'm also not keeping like checks and tabs on like, hey, I gave you this and that and this, like I want something in return. So again, I'm not super methodical about it, and I'm not keeping a tally on it. I think if you just operate life and business with the mentality that you just want to seek to give, and you just operate that way, like that's just your mode of being, man, just good things happen. Like the universe kicks in, laws of reciprocation, like doors and opportunities open up. And then, yeah, like you might have, I think giving and taking is a two-way street, right? Like, so I'm not saying don't take. That's not what I'm saying, because by definition, if I was saying that, then how can you give? Right? Like if I was to give you, the other person has to receive it. And that's a gift for me as well, because I genuinely want to give. If that person rejects me, they've robbed me of the opportunity to give. So it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
It's a yin and a yang. So I'm not saying not to take. I'm saying don't lead with that.
Yeah.
Don't always have your hand out wanting. And I think the other problem, man, I think this is a really valuable part of this conversation, is that, man, so many people just expect things. right? And they're so entitled, and that drives me wild, man. Like, because you're not owed anything. Like, you got to go out there and do the work and put the effort.
Hmm.
And I think too many people are just entitled. Like, life is too easy for them. People are too soft and comfortable.
Indeed, man. Um, an easy way to tell if somebody's a leech is if they're kind of pretentious, or they talk a lot, or like you say, they constantly have an agenda to push on some.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I remember in one meeting, uh, we have like a weekly meeting here in Atlanta, and I knew this one cat, like knew everybody in Atlanta, and was constantly investing. And when he got up to speak to everybody, because everybody has an opportunity to speak what they want or need,
Mhm.
um, in front of everybody, he just said, "I'm just here if anybody wants some help." Um, and he could have said, "I'm working on this flip, I'm working on that, this and that," and that stood out to me of like, this guy is really, like you say, about giving first, and the
Yeah.
rest will figure out itself. I know you're enjoying that content, but I just wanted to personally invite you to the Commonwealth Affordable Housing Fund. If you want to passively earn while also building communities, doing philanthropy even, while getting quarterly distributions and even sharing in the exit about 5 years down the line, then please join us. This used to just be for friends and family, but you could join in now. You could be essentially earning through an expert, which is I, running the investment firm Commonwealth. So if you want to be a part of it, and also get access to exclusive events where we go to in-progress construction, and I show you how your money is being used actively, and how the renovation was just complete, and how this is going to help change people's lives, how we negotiated an acquisition. So you could be a part of those events throughout the year and also earn passively. So if you want to be a part of that, please click the link below, and I'll let you back to your awesome content. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. And first of all, I think that's a great story and a great example of just a unique way to stand out, because everybody's out there asking for something, and that's the platform for it. That's the format. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that this guy was like, I'm here to serve and give and help. Now, part two of that equation is if you were to go approach him, people can sniff out within a short amount of time if the guy's genuine and he wants to give, or if he's got a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, man. It's like if you're gonna give, do it from the heart. Like, do it to give and provide and contribute and add value. Don't do it because you have a hidden agenda, because that's gonna get snuffed out pretty quickly.
Yeah. All right. Since you're also a believer, I'll also add this. Figuring out when the ask happens or should happen is kind of driven by the Holy Spirit too sometimes. Like
Man, amen.
if
100%.
like you kind of feel calling to say something right then and there, and like there's almost a thing in the back of your head like, I'm gonna regret this if I don't say this right now.
Can I share some with you that's right on brand with what you're saying? You mind if I read something from a text message that happened 4 or 5 hours ago? It was this morning.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
So I read by the way, if you're not a believer, if you have, whatever you believe in is perfectly fine. I'm not here to try to, shove my faith down your throat, but I'm also not going to like hide it. Right. And I want to share something with you. So I read this daily devotional called Jesus Calling,
Okay.
which I highly recommend. It's a short one pager that I read every day. And it's 2 paragraphs. So if you'll allow me, let me read this to you, and let me kind of like, spoiler alert. I read this, and there was 2 people that came to mind for me, and I texted to them. I don't know why they came to mind. And I hadn't spoken to them in a minute. It's been a while since I talked to them, but God put their name in my heart,
Hmm.
and I sent it to them. And within minutes, one of the guys texted me back. And in fact, I won't mention his name, but I'll read you his text. He said, "You have no idea what this means to me this AM. I'm sitting here praying right now. Today I'm about to sign a contract to buy a particular franchise. I have felt good about it 100% of the way. In the last 2 days, as I'm about to sign, fear started to creep in. Started to think of all the things that can go wrong. None of these feelings existed throughout the last 3 months until now. I would love to jump on a quick call at some point this AM just to talk it out with you. Thank you for sending this divine timing." So, like, that fills me up more than like doing the next deal or like accomplishing the next, like that's what it's about for me.
Yeah.
Like the fact that, but you got to act on it. So when you feel something, when God puts something on your heart, like act on it, right? Like do something, because had I not sent that text, and by the way, we hopped on like a 50-minute call that was totally unplanned, and I was cool with it because I had time carved out for things like that, right? And um, I just walked away fulfilled in that I know I was able to contribute and add some value to him because he was going through something challenging. He's got a big decision to make. And a simple text of one page of some scripture that I read just resonated with him. And that's what he needed to hear.
That's awesome, man. Very good connection point there. Um, it kind of naturally draws us into the next part. What gives you gratification? Winning. And I also think about winning, and the way you kind of began, one of the major points was you actually having a big thing you learned from. So having a thing we could learn from failure or loss, even though failure or loss is a subjective word, I think of that as winning, because then you'll know that much better to avoid it in the future, which
Yeah.
is ahead of the curve for most of
Yeah.
the population.
This might be controversial, but my belief is that, and I should reframe that, right? Because beliefs are meant to be challenged, and sometimes I question my own beliefs, and I have different perspectives as I grow and learn and talk to people. But one of the things I believe is that in order to win, you're gonna have to go through some losses,
Hmm.
right? Like I don't know whether it's a sports analogy or whether it's business or whether it's health and fitness or relationships, really any aspect of our life. I don't know anybody who's only won and
Mhm.
hasn't had trials, tribulations, challenges, setbacks. So like the question is, how do you view the quote unquote losses, right? Or the quote unquote failures? Like some people call them L's, lessons learned. So are you going to kind of Monday morning quarterback the situation, right? Like, are you going to go back and watch the film and listen to the game tape and say, okay, well, I did this right, I did this wrong. And then are you going to use that information to grow forward? Or are you just going to let that hold you back? Are you going to get bitter, resentful, mad, angry? Those are things that don't serve us. So what gives, for me, winning is contribution. I think we referenced Tony Robbins earlier, and I think it's him that says a life worth living is a life worth giving. Uh, and so contribution, man, like that text I read you, like that filled me up this morning. Don't get me wrong, like I want to go out and win and succeed in business and make a bunch of money and prosper, and because I believe that now I can help more people. And so but I believe that contribution leads to that, right? It's in alignment with it. The marketplace is going to reward you for the value that you provided. Like it's all built that way. Uh, so yeah, man. When I hear your question about like what is winning, winning is impact, man. Winning is helping people. That's why I got a message from somebody in your team, just a few days ago, inviting me to be on here, and it's like, yeah, let's do it, right? Because it's contribution.
Indeed. And I think if you could, to your earlier point, like assuming losses and systematizing losses into a reflection mode is also a great thing to do. It makes me think back to when I worked corporate at Turner Broadcasting as a website developer. We actually, at the end of every 3 weeks, we would have a retrospective meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be just to see what went wrong in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
And it wasn't about you are dumb, you messed up. It was about what can we do to get ahead of this in the future
that's
and
right.
be efficient going forward.
Yeah, I think what comes up for me before we transition here, I think what comes up for me is oftentimes we find ourselves wanting the latest and greatest strategy, system to implement, book, podcast, and all the resources that we need to succeed. 9 out of 10 times, I think, are already within our grasp or ecosystem, right? And your point of like, if you're on sales calls, have those calls recorded and then take the time to listen to those back, because you can learn from, hey, I said it this way, I could have approached it this way, or I could have used that word, or I could have handled this objection in this manner. And again, I use the term Monday morning quarterback because I like football, and that's just a term that means after the game, like on Monday, quarterbacks will go into the film room and they'll watch the game tape from Sunday. And they
Oh,
said, hey, I did this right, or hey, I didn't see that defender, or there was an opportunity here. Apply that Monday morning quarterback kind of phrase to your life and business.
Smart. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. That's sweet. Okay. Well, we naturally are going into enjoying next. So how do you enjoy what you've built, brother?
Yeah, man. Family first and foremost. Love spending time with family. Love traveling. Grateful and fortunate. We spent about 3 weeks in Italy with family and friends this last
Nice.
summer, and so yeah, man. I just think like I enjoy. You got to enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? And I'm in a season right now where I'm in. I think the pendulum kind of this word balance is something that I don't want to say wrestling with because that's too strong of a word, but I'm toying and I'm playing with this word balance because I think if you think about the word balance, we're always going to be off balance in some sense, right? Like in other words, right now you and I are doing this podcast interview. That's time that you and I can't spend with our family. So we're off balance when it comes to like family in this very moment. But later on today, like I'm gonna play with my girls and we're gonna jump on the trampoline and have dinner and hang out. And so I'm not doing business. So I it's hard to achieve equilibrium. I don't know that that exists, but I think you need to be very mindful and intentional about your time. And if you're somebody who's always working, I think that's great. I think we were built to create and to work. In fact, I'm reading this book that I would recommend to your audience. The author's name is Daniel Lapman. It's called Business Secrets of the Bible. So even if your faith is somewhere else, I think you'll get nuggets and value from this book. But he talks about the fact that God created us to work, to create, and to serve God's other children. But if you're just doing that and you're sacrificing other important areas of your life, relationships, family, health, and fitness, I think that's where things are off. So I'm a big believer of creating a vision for your life, getting crystal clear about what you want your life to look like, and then see how your existing business or job or wherever you are fits into that. And hopefully it supports and enhances the life that you want to live. Because too often times I look at people's calendars and it's all work, but they don't have time carved out for, going to watch their daughter's dance recital or going to their kid's football game or having dinner as a family or going out on a date night. Like, what really, really matters, because we can't take these material possessions with us, right? But the memories, the experiences, like that's what to me is invaluable. And I'm not saying don't go get like toys and houses and like it's there, like there's nothing wrong with it. Just make sure that that doesn't take first position, if that makes sense.
That makes sense for sure. So you mentioned going on the trampoline and stuff. So that's good family time for you to play. What do you personally do to play? Get
Oh
back into
man,
that childhood
yeah,
state.
that's an easy one to answer. So the last probably, I don't know, 15, 16 months or so, I've really got into pickleball.
Oh,
So
okay.
I enjoy playing pickleball 3, 4 times a week. I like working out, sauna, cold plunge, just kind of that. Like I've really immersed myself in that world. Outside of travel, uh, yeah, man, I think, I enjoy listening to music and every now and then going to a concert with friends. But yeah, I think pickleball is kind of the hobby that I'm into right now.
Yeah, cool. And then for anybody listening to, make sure to regularly ask yourself, how do you play? Because if you're just adulting all the time,
Yeah, man.
you're probably not doing it right.
Right. That's right. To your point, Ivan, look at kids, man. Kids have a carefree, kind of relaxed vibe, and too many adults are just uptight, man. They're wearing a frown. They're not happy. Like it's cliche, but we only get one crack at this thing called life.
Yeah,
So, think of yourself in the future on your deathbed. What are you going to look back and regret or wish you would have done?
for sure.
Right. Don't get to that point because we never know when it's our time.
Yeah. And if something is making you frown, like go after it with a laser beam as fast as possible because it's robbing your life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. I wonder if I want to expand on that, but I know we're running out of time. Like, I guess we could touch on it real quick. How do you put a laser beam on things that draw energy away from you?
I think it's doing like thought auditing. I think looking at where you're spending your time, right? So like I learned years ago this exercise where for an entire week, for 7 days, in 15 to 30-minute time segments, you track everything you do on, it could be on a post-it note, sheet of paper, or Excel. I mean, you don't have to overcomplicate it. It's a simple system. You're literally just tracking what you do. And then what I like to do is once I've tracked everything I've done for in a week, I'll put it into a sheet of paper or Excel with 4 columns. One is the things that are like, if we're talking about business, revenue generating, and they fit within my unique ability and skill set, right? The second is non-revenue generating, and they fit within my unique ability and skill set. Like, in other words, I might be really, really good at sales, but maybe I don't like it, right? It would go in that second column. The
Okay.
third is non-revenue generating, but it fits in my skill sets and I enjoy it. And the last one is non-revenue generating and I hate it. I don't enjoy it. So document what you do for an entire week, put it into these 4 columns. You want to be spending your time where you're generating revenue and or the things that fill you up and enjoy you. So always ask yourself, like, is the thing I'm doing, does it give me energy or does it drain me from energy? Like
Mhm.
this podcast, this interview, this is energy giving for me, right? You know, maybe jumping into QuickBooks and like doing the finances, maybe for you that's energy draining, right? So like it's a who question, not a how question. So just I think if you're just mindful and intentional and thoughtful about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and not just like acting as like a leaf in the wind where it's just going to take you where it wants to go. Too many people are on robot mode, right? And life is just taking them. So I think if you're intentional about carving out time, I like to carve out time in the morning, spend time in the Word, prayer. I like to have a particular routine that I go through and just thinking, man. Sometimes I go on think walks. I'll walk for 3 miles, about an hour, with no device, and I'll just think. That's kind of like where I get my downloads from God, and I get inspiration sometimes. Sometimes I get nothing, and that's okay,
Yeah,
right? So,
that's awesome, bro. This is easily one of my top three favorite recordings so far. This is
oh,
awesome.
thank you, man.
We
Thank
got
you.
a
That's
great combination of high level and specific level stuff. So this has been awesome. Let's go ahead and jump into the last piece. So reserve. This ties in naturally into slotting things as you were just talking about. So there's emotional, spiritual, physical, financial reserves. Do you want to offer any advice on any one of those buckets?
Do me a favor because I want to make sure that I can answer your question directly. Talk a little bit more about reserves. So obviously, financial reserves pretty self-explanatory. Spiritual reserves, like elaborate and give me a little bit more context when you use the word reserves as like one of your
Uh,
principles.
okay. So spiritual, I maybe you're like this. I kind of like to go extreme sometimes. Melinda Gates was in an interview a couple years back, and she was asked a couple different questions, but the one question I'm going extreme on is, did you ever have a meeting with Jeffrey Epstein?
Hmm.
And she said yes, and I immediately felt like I didn't want to be in the room, like I
Hmm.
had to leave as fast as possible. So that could be a spiritual, um, like I don't know, like a spiritual evil you don't want around you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only way I could put it into simple words. So that could be against your spiritual reserve, pulling it away as fast as possible if you decide to hang around that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm answering the question kind of the way you're thinking about it, but here's what comes to mind for me. I think it's been said if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? So where I want to kind of elaborate and take that is, what are your guiding principles in life? What are your core values, right? Like, is integrity important to you? Do you want to be a trustworthy and honest person that always does right by people? Does your word matter to you and your reputation? Are you the type of person that you say you're going to do something and you do it? Um, what are your pillars? Like, what makes up who you're, like your soul, your being, your character, right? Are you the type of person that does right even when no one sees it? Are you the type of person that's going to do right even when nobody's going to know about it? Right. So these are just some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself. But like, who do you stand for? Like, one of the exercises that had a really big impact on myself and my wife is years ago. I don't know. This was probably 7, 8 years ago. We were at an event, and They walked us through the eulogy exercise. And the eulogy exercise it's kind of a two-part exercise. And I remember to this day, my wife and I were in our hotel room and she was kind of crying going through it. And it really impacted her. And it did me as well, but just in a different way. And the eulogy exercise, Ivan, is pretend it's you pass, right? You die for whatever reason. You're no longer here. But you have the opportunity to observe your funeral. Number one, who's there? And what are they saying about you? What are your friends, family, colleagues, coworkers, business partners, associates, all the people that knew you that showed up at your funeral? What would they say about Ivan? What would they say about you? Now, the second part of this equation is where it gets interesting, or this exercise. What would they say about you if they were on a lie detector and they could not lie?
Oh,
Like if they were if they took truth serum and they had to say how they felt about you and how they saw you as a person, what would they say?
I haven't got a big old head.
Well, they might say that, but what would they say about like you, who Ivan is as a person, right? Like your
Yeah.
character, right? So the bigger the delta, in other words, the bigger the gap between those two answers and responses, the more work you got to do. And you want to work to shrink that. So eventually the point where what they would say at your eulogy versus what they would say if they were on truth serum or a lie detector test are the same exact thing, right? And how do you make people feel, right? Like what's the impact you have on people? Like what's that saying, man? I don't want to butcher it, but like people don't know how much you care until they care how much you know, or something along those lines. So that's why I think this ties maybe perfectly to our earlier part of the conversation about giving and contribution and service. If you live your life like that, man, you know that you've had a positive ripple effect on other people's lives. And I don't know about you, dude, but like that's how I want to live my life. And when I'm no longer here, I want to know that I've made a dent in this world in a positive way. Some people do it at a massively large scale, and that's amazing. And other people live life and they don't leave the world a better place, as corny as that may sound to some people. But uh, so when you talk about reserves, man, like that's what comes to mind for me. It's just like, what's your code? And do you honor that code? And then how do you leave people?
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Way to hit a lot of the buckets all at once with that. To your last point, there was one quote by Pastor John Ramirez that he wants the devil to say when he passes. Thank God that guy's off the map.
There you go. There you go. That's right. Give the devil hell, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and man, one last thing. I know we're wrapping up here, but like,
Mhm.
spiritual warfare is a real thing, dude.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm in seasons in my life where like just things they're not vibing, they're not clicking. There's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of obstacles and challenges. I don't always do this, but I'm becoming more mindful to stop and say, am I on the right path here? I think I'm on the right path, right? I think the devil spirit is using tactics, things, people to get in my way because I'm doing God's work. I'm doing good. I'm moving in a certain direction that is in opposition to him. So
Mhm.
just be mindful, man, that when you're getting ready to do something big or do good things, like uh, spiritual warfare is a real thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's why, whether you're a man or woman listening to this, like we need to wake up and we need to sharpen ourselves. And that's part of the reason you're listening to this podcast. Part of the reason I decided to accept the invite to hop on here with Ivan, because iron sharpens iron and we constantly need to strengthen ourselves and each other,
Yeah,
because attacks are real.
for sure, man. Especially when we're doing something great, like you said.
Yeah.
It fascinates me when people at scale, the entire population probably believes in ghosts. And if you go into a haunted house, you're going to feel all sorts of weird things.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to God, it's like, I'm not sure. So there's almost a more belief in the dark world and ghosts and stuff, which is really confusing and fascinating.
That's interesting you say that. Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
that. I can see that.
Um, but yeah, we're just about out of time. How could people collaborate with you, Ax?
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. Well, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but more specifically, I host a podcast called The Flip Empire Show, which I've been doing for a little bit over 7 years now. So flipempire.com/podcast that'll take you right to Apple Podcasts. And then I talked earlier briefly about our Ascend Mastermind community for real estate investors and entrepreneurs. ascendyoursuccess.com is where you can find out more about that. But yeah, I'm pretty accessible. If you guys need anything, or if I can, help in any way, feel free to reach out on social media, and happy to help however I can.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put those links in the show notes below. Thanks for watching another episode of From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Thank you for joining us on another episode of From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. I hope you got a lot of return on investment for your time today, and I encourage you to share it with other people so that they could also get returns with this valuable education to invest in real estate. We're also sharing this free education because we want to help people learn how to invest so that they could also create more affordable housing units. We have a great goal of creating 2.5 million affordable housing units by 2047, and free education like this is a big part of that. So by you sharing, you are a part of the equation to create those affordable housing units. So I can't wait to see the end of the road that we're going to achieve together. Have an amazing and blessed day.